Ghost of Yōtei is an incredibly vast game, taking on a quest for revenge spanning from beautiful grasslands to frozen mountain peaks. There is a hell of a lot to do, places to find, and enemies to fight across the land of Ezo, so in this video I'll be going over 10 crucial tips you should know to get the most enjoyable experience during this beautiful game. Thank you very much to Sony for providing a copy of the game and sponsoring this video, and you can check out Ghost of Yōtei out now only on PS5. So let's dive right in. So to begin, Yōtei actually has a ton of gameplay and customizability settings that can transform things into a completely different experience, many of which are worth toggling or turning on, some maybe not for a first playthrough. So for starters, difficulty. I played the majority of the game on hard, and it's certainly been a challenge in places. You can generally stand up to 2 or maybe 3 hits in this mode, but it's still pretty unforgiving. Lethal even more so. I'd call that mode far more realistic in terms of damage, but I found plenty of bosses especially lethal enough in just hard mode, personally. Target lock, of course, provides a more systematic means of fighting multiple enemies, and then we have photo mode. Pretty comprehensive in Yōtei, with a lot of adjustable settings like weather and time of day, for those wanting to capture some snapshots of what is a truly beautiful setting. As someone who's been more or less entirely PC-based for the last decade, I think, I did not realize what the PS5 was capable of. I mean, the draw distance, the load times, or pretty much lack thereof, both very much impressed me. And in fact, over in display settings, you can get even more out of the visuals, with 4 graphic modes first of all to choose from. Quality, with better graphics at 30 FPS, performance mode targeting 60 FPS, 30 FPS with ray tracing, or if you have a PS5 Pro, ray traced lighting at 60 FPS. And yeah, if you do own a Pro, then this is the setting you'll want to immediately go and turn on. So in my opinion, performance mode or ray tracing pro is the way to go. There's also a bunch of filmmaker camera settings, including the black and white Kurosawa mode, if you're a fan of old samurai films, but otherwise, Ezo has so much vibrancy that I'd say you're losing a lot not seeing it in all its colourful glory. And by the way, what you're seeing here is not one for one how it looked on my TV. On there it was a little more vibrant, like I think this capture card and YouTube compression seem to have sadly lost a little bit of that in my captured footage. Now, I love how the wind is a feature to guide us to points of interest in this game, and it's much more immersive than a simple HUD marker. But if you are finding it a little difficult to follow, then there is also enhanced wind visibility and auto-snapping your camera in the correct direction, both found in accessibility settings. A bunch of the minigames in Yōtei also fully utilize the abilities of the PS5's wireless DualSense controller, which makes for some very nice additional immersion. But there is also the option to turn those off if you prefer, and if you're struggling with the quick-timed button pressing of the Bamboo Strike minigame, then you can also remove the time constraints of that here as well. There's also a couple more things here we'll look at later in the video, but those are the most important settings to be aware of and maybe play around with right at the start of the game. Before we get on to the bigger game mechanics, one little early quest you want to make sure to complete sooner rather than later is called Old Trails, found by heading over to the stables west of Atsu's home. Now, the quest itself is pretty straightforward. You help return a horsemaster's horses to him, but the reason to do it early is that completing this will allow you to choose the colour and name of your horse, which will then remain the same for the rest of the game. It doesn't give any special buffs per se doing this, but Atsu will then refer to her horse by the name you chose for the rest of the playthrough. It just sort of deepens that bond early on and provides that little bit more connection and immersion when riding around the rest of Ezo, which you'll be doing a lot of. Next up, let's look at the 5 main melee stances for Ghost of Yōtei, with a new one learned in each of the main map regions that we'll visit. In fact, if you have a tendency to try and mostly complete one region fully before moving on, you may actually go for 20 or 30 hours, only having unlocked some of these. That's actually how I played, not knowing any better, and whilst I got by okay, I was certainly at a disadvantage against certain types of enemies. So let's go through. The katana is the most effective against other katana wielding wielding foes, dual katanas against polearm wielders, our Yari polearm, funnily enough, against wielders of dual blades or kusaragamas, the huge odachi against brutes, and the kusaragama to break shields. You can absolutely use any weapon against any foe and again be okay, but you will certainly break their stance quicker switching to the appropriate weapon. So becoming a master of all 5 is absolutely the way to go. Now, character builds are still possible in Yōtei, but they're more determined by your choice of armor sets and which of the 6 charms you equip. In fact, in the gear menu, we can design different loadouts specifically for this purpose. But back to the weapons, whilst yes, there is a general best set of combos by which to use these against different foes, each still has its own wider utility. The odachi actually launches very powerful attacks against everyone, and in smaller fights always works great. It's just slower at deflecting lots of attacks. The kusaragama can be swung in an arc for wide AoE damage. The Yari is good for knocking people off their feet, and dual katanas are, as you would expect, very fast. Again, you will have to travel to a new region to learn each of these, so maybe make a point of doing that sooner if you want to have the full arsenal of weapons across more of your playthrough. There's also more specialist abilities that you can further unlock for each of these by completing more training with each of their respective masters. Still on the topic of gear, you'll be upgrading pretty much everything multiple times across your playthrough. Melee weapons can be upgraded with scavenged materials at our home forge, whilst armor, equipment and ranged weapons can be upgraded for money and material at their respective vendors. Now, 2 things. Certain upgrade materials will be region locked, meaning you'll have to travel to certain parts of the map in order to get them, and leveling up through exploration is pretty much what this game's all about, in fact. Second, there will be some overlap of different things requiring the same materials, and therefore a need to prioritize what to upgrade first. Now, personally, I would say make sure your 5 melee weapons are as upgraded as much as possible, whenever possible, since you'll be using those the most, followed by ranged and quickfire items. These will all still often be used, but are more preference dependent, I suppose. And finally, armor upgrades don't offer extra protection as such, but rather each armor set provides 3 different perks, which become more powerful when the armor is upgraded. Absolutely worth doing still, but so long as you've upgraded the armor set you're wearing, the rest can take a back seat if you are low on materials. There's also plenty of cosmetic purchases to be made around Ezo, but they operate on a completely different currency, traded for flowers. So make sure to pick those up whenever you see them, as you're going to need a lot. Many of the charms can also be upgraded, but that's done by completing their respective challenges, not needing money or material. And we'll come back to the best way to make more money in Yōtei in a bit. First up though, leveling Atsu's own skills. These are again things unlocked by exploration, namely by visiting altars of reflection, mostly found by visiting interesting places, climbing mountain peaks, and clearing enemy camps. If you do want a shortcut to find some of these more quickly, then the cartographer, found in every village, will happily trade their locations for a fair amount of coin. Though it's not entirely necessary to buy his maps to find them, and in fact, to be honest, I would say hold off on buying his maps immediately when traveling to a new place, because odds are you'll come across some of these altars on your travels anyway, and you can always go back and buy the maps later if not. But personally, I'd say save that money for buying upgrades and maybe gambling it for more. Now, in terms of which skills to level first, there's of course perfect parrying and assassinations, blocking arrows, shoulder charge, and reviving yourself all have utility as well, of course, and you will eventually be able to unlock everything if you explore enough. So it's more a question of when you buy it, not if. But that's not all. Health can be massively boosted from what we start with, and that is done by visiting hot springs. So look out for the little red trees in the distance that indicate the presence of one of these. Settlers will sometimes direct you to them, or occasionally a little golden bird will swoop down to lead you to this or another point of interest. But if you want to unlock a definitive way to find all the hot springs, this can be done by learning a certain Shamisen song. Songs themselves are again points of interest, places of inspiration that we can visit to learn a new song, each of which will then guide us to certain locations thereafter. Hot springs, yes, but also bamboo, where we can increase our spirits, Ainu items, which can help level up one of our outfits that boosts discoverability even further, vanity gear, shrines to unlock more charms, and wolf dens, for unlocking more ways for our wolf to aid us in combat. Again, many of these things will be found by just generally exploring, but if you are targeting things you've missed, especially later on, then the Shamisen is really going to become the key to sweeping up the rest of the map, as it were. But whilst the Shamisen can ensure that no stone goes unturned by the late game, one thing specifically I wish I'd tracked down earlier in my playthrough is one specific charm found in the eastern edge of Tokachi Range, the second or maybe third place you'll travel to. The charm of Futsunushi is our reward for scaling the mountain up to the Faithful Leap Shrine, which can be done at any time, but is sort of tucked out of the way of everything, so I at least didn't find it until much later. Now, playing on hard mode, I definitely found the parry and dodge timings to be fairly unforgiving. As someone who tends to panic spam buttons until my character does the thing that I want, timing these with calmness and precision is probably a technique I still haven't fully grasped yet. Fortunately, by equipping the charm of Futsunushi in your loadout, parries, and perfect dodges are easier to perform, i.e. the windows in which they can be successfully performed are wider, and you'll actually have a fair bit of time to process and react on the tougher difficulties. In fact, pairing this up with the bouncy armor, which disables standard parries but makes perfect ones easier, has become my later game tactic for winning some truly tough boss fights. More so leaning into the method of defeating the boss by learning and countering their movesets, just with a little more breathing room. So if there's one charm you want to pick up sooner rather than later, it's this one. Now, I said earlier we'd come back to the quickest, most sustainable way to earn money in this game, and that is of course by gambling, via the coin-flicking minigame of Zeni Hajiki. It is of course also the quickest way to lose all your money down to the point where you can't even afford to play anymore, which can be very frustrating when you just wanted one game to win enough to buy your next upgrade. Now, the haptic triggers on the PS5's DualSense controller are pretty good at indicating the level of tension in your flick, and I find if the coins are all close together, then starting with one in the middle and working your way out can be a good tactic for not accidentally hitting multiple coins. And you'll want to play this game at least twice in every venue to win some more unique charms, after which you can just rinse and repeat to raise whatever cash you need, provided you can win more often than you can lose. If that's not the case, then there is one thing that might help. Back in the accessibility settings is the Zeni Hajiki shot power display. It's basically an indicator for where your coin is going to hit and turns Zeni Hajiki onto easy mode. I personally like the challenge of sort of blindly doing it, so I've left it off for most of my playthrough, but if you do want to win more, and therefore inevitably have to play less rounds of this game, then, you know, turn it on and just win. Either way, Zeni Hajiki is the most sustainable means of making quick cash, provided you already have some to start with. With Mount Yōtei being this striking centerpiece in like the very opening of the game and then most of the rest of it, the very first question I had was, when do I get to climb it? And yes, doing so is of course possible, and pretty early on too. In the northwestern part of the starting region, right by a dueling tree just south of it, will be an entrance taking us on the path up Mount Yōtei. And after a fair bit of a climb, the summit will actually be a completely open area to explore. There's some powerful early charms around the rim summit of the mountain, and you can even run down into the volcano bits. A beautiful perspective, of course, as well on the rest of the map, and a golden opportunity for some photo mode shots. Whilst there's plenty of ways to regen health and spirits during a fight, some charms will add buffs to both of these, and ending the suffering of dying foes will restore spirit points. The key to most victories, I think, is in simple preparation. Now, whilst exploring, there's literally some thing or event to grab your attention every minute, and jumping from fight to fight is all too easy a habit to fall into. But taking the time to set up a campfire, restore our health and spirits, and cook some food for additional perks can make a tremendous amount of difference before going into the next fight, especially since said next fight can often come by complete surprise. The campfire also allows you to recraft and restock all of your various ammunition, which can be easy to forget to do, but trying to use something you've then run out of during the next fight can also just be a death sentence, so make sure to remember to do that. And not only that, but more often than not, camping will bring different vendors to you, usually someone with something new to sell which you may not have gone back to pick up yet. So camping, whilst an easily forgotten activity, is something I would say to do after every fight. It takes about 2 seconds and you don't even have to sleep. You can just press circle and then get up and leave. Finally, and this is probably the most important thing when it comes to having the best experience in Ghost of Yōtei, don't be afraid to get sidetracked. Whilst the wind may be guiding you to the next quest that you've highlighted on the map, there's no doubt going to be a handful of things between you and it to interrupt your journey. Maybe you run into a settler who puts you onto a different side quest. Maybe the golden bird flies down and lures you away to something else nearby. Or maybe something catches your eye in the distance and you just fancy then going and exploring it. I don't think any of the quests are time sensitive. I haven't come across any at least, so I think allowing yourself to get distracted is perfectly fine. I mean, that's how I experienced pretty much all of this game, and it made the whole thing a lot more fun. I wasn't systematically ticking off map markers and objectives. I was exploring the world and constantly coming across the unexpected. I might start out with one quest or objective and wind up completing maybe 5 more before actually finally getting to my initial one. The beauty of this world is something that begs to be blindly explored, and by the time I got late into my playthrough, clearing up missed things with the guidance of the Shamisen, I found that by allowing that curiosity of mine to take hold at every opportunity, I'd already discovered so much purely by exploration. So basically, what it boils down to is that if you do get distracted from the task at hand, just don't worry and go along with that. Now, Ghost of Yōtei is a huge game, and I'd love to explore it more in subsequent videos. So comment below what else you'd like me to cover in Ghost of Yōtei, which you can check out now only on PS5 through my link down below. Thank you again to Sony for sponsoring this video and letting me spend a full week or so of my life just exploring and enjoying your beautiful game. And a huge thank you as always to the patrons and channel members for going the extra mile to support the channel. Cheers for watching, I'm Sam Bram, and I'll see you in the next one.